Hello, meetuppers. Stop bullshitting about AI. There is no such thing as AI alone. There is no such thing as AI without humans. Somewhere there is a human, and it will stay so for generations. In my opinion, we are generations away from a super AI and even from a strong AI. That's it. So let's get back to those humans. The AI you meet in the web shops, the AI you are using with consumer products, those must obviously be human-centered. There is an AI, there is a human or a scientist behind research-focused products as well. There should be someone who sets up a cure for cancer, an AI that is searching for a cure for cancer. There is a human who needs to understand what happens. Even the robots that are assembling your car needs to be set up by a human. And all these touch points needs to be human-centered. It will be used or operated by humans, and all the rules apply. It must be valuable, usable, and understandable. How can we do it right? How can we make sure that the AI-powered world satisfies the three pillars of a great experience? My name is Csongor, and I will be your host tonight on this UX Budapest meetup. Today, you will listen to three insightful talks. Balázs, Dénes, and Zoli will all gravitate around the AI topic, around the data. There are also some rules for the meetup. So one is for presenters. Dear presenters, please keep your 25 minutes because we have not a very long time, and also after 25 minutes, there will be an option for the attendees to ask questions. To ask questions, please use the chat over there, and we will answer your questions for 5 minutes. Also, after every presentation, you will have, as I mentioned, of course, you will have those 5 minutes to ask questions. And as I also mentioned, you will have some answers for your questions. Anything that is about that 5 minutes could be answered at the end of the meetup, so we will still have like 15 minutes to answer questions. Okay, enough of the host. Now let's see the speakers. The first speaker will be Balázs Hámornik and Eszter Karl, and they are from Emarsys. You should know that there is no recommendation system without your data. And there is no data without your consent. It's hard to track for data scientists to sort this out. The goal is not to trick the customer. The goal is to stay transparent and to stay clear. That's the topic of my lovely colleagues, because I as well I'm working at Emarsys. Balázs and Eszter, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Csongor, for this great introduction. And hello to everyone. I'm Balázs, and I will talk about human-centered AI from a privacy perspective. And I share my screen before I forgot. So here it goes. Give me thumbs up if you see my screen. Many thumbs. Okay, so human-centered AI must be a privacy-centered AI, as Csongor just set up the basics. I will talk about AI. I will define it for now on a high level to demystify it. I will talk about privacy, how privacy can make AI human-centered. And I will talk about one of the greatest threats on privacy, that is tracking, human behavior tracking, or the way to acquire human behavior. Wait a second. And I will talk about consent, to stay safe, to get and collect data legally. This is the schema of the world online we are living in. The behavior, your surfing, your shopping experience, especially it's Black Friday today, so great deals to have a look on the internet in e-commerce stores. By clicking and browsing, you generate data, your behavior is translated into data, and the data is processed by some sort of AI. That AI enables and powers the personalization that makes your shopping experience, your retail experience, your entertainment experience, and your device usage experience personalized, smooth, feels more efficient. You find just the right thing. You got offered the right next step. But how it's happening? To define this box, let's say AI is a moving target. Since different ages, different things meant AI, it's always about wow and the magic. To really high level define AI is something like a capability that human cannot even imagine that a machine can do. And this changes from time to time. So things like an iPhone has been science fiction a couple of decades ago, and now it's just reality. And there are now other science fictions we call AI. To put it into practice, actually in the box of AI, there is machine learning applied. That is a set of algorithms using advanced mathematics for predictive problems. So based on behavior, calculating what is the product that you are most likely to buy. That's a calculation with certain mathematical methods. So that's how it's working in the box. What makes this whole box human-centered? I think there are three aspects for that. The first is usability. I can figure out how to use such a product. Just stick with this e-commerce site example. I can figure out how to check out a product and become a happy owner. It's about ethics that makes it human-centered, because that AI will not harm others or me. And the third one, which I will focus on tonight, is privacy. This AI, to be human-centered, should protect my data as far as I want it. And just briefly, privacy means a control over information describing or generated by an individual. And it's like a simple sentence. What I let you know about me and what I allow you to tell about me to others. So that's all about privacy. If we introduce privacy to this real world, then I have a control about the data generated by me and getting shared, and that control is used for less exposure. Less data will be fed into the AI, and that will reduce the power of ML, machine learning, leveraging personalization there. So less personalized experience you will get at the end. Less data science, less personalization. Hold on a sec. So more privacy, less profit, since personalization is for profit, isn't it? Then that's the issue here. If privacy is badly treated, then it harms profit. But privacy is a challenge. The better it is respected, the better it is respecting privacy, the more it leads to profit. And I will focus on this part. Just let's have a simple example of a website with some nice products just picked for you. These personalized recommendations are built on private behavior, your personal behavior tracked. And then based on that, there's a nice calculation giving you what you're likely to buy. Making your website experience good. but without that, it's just empty. So privacy is good and bad. How to make it good for both? Privacy is becoming a topic globally. It is protected in some parts of the world by the law, by business interests, by means of technology. However, if we think about privacy, despite these protections, if you just simply say that, I think there will be no problem, or others will not misuse my data. Why my data? Who cares about my data? But that's the sentence after shit usually happens. Think about two scandalous examples, like Hillary Clinton using private email server for state emails, ended up in serious issues, or Cambridge Analytica acquiring Facebook activity for powering political advertisements, also a scandalous thing. So your data is just a piece in it and as valuable as other pieces. If we talk about privacy, we talk about tracking on the web, which is the most challenging part. Web behavior tracking is about collecting and sharing your web usage information. The key technology here to remember is the cookies in the browser to store identifiers to remember you. Not the cookies itself, the problem, but the covert tracking is. Tracking that you are not aware of, that you miss the awareness that you are being tracked from time to time from site to site. How do you know whether you are tracked on a website at all? And let's make it a little bit interactive. So please use the chat now and give me guesses. How do you know whether you are tracked on a website? Give me some ideas. Type it in the chat. Here it comes. Ghostery, yeah, that's a tool for it. Others. Yeah, Safari, that's another good example. And some others. Just good hints the other people gave you. You're browsing in a browser, so the browser might give you a hint, like Safari does. Built with 1,000 trackers. Yeah, that's also nice. Location, yeah, location tracking is mainly indicated by the OS or by the browsers. There's another part of it. Asking tricky IT people. They are tricky. You never know whether they are good or bad. Cookie banners, you really hate there. They are telling you about. Yeah, also the output, that tracking, you see that banner following you. That's a proof to say. Also the cookie banners and the privacy policies. Let's move forward. Really good awareness you have. I like it. How many trackers you have encountered in the last months of you on the web? Give me just guesses, quantities. Guess the quantity, how many trackers you have encountered in the last month on the web while enjoying this shopping month of November. Oh, large numbers, large intervals. You can give me ranges also, just numbers. So at least 200, 100,000, 1,000 or 100,000. Okay. XM Digital has got 100 cookies. How do you know? Let me help you, but you're really on the right track, I think. Let's have an example from Firefox. Browsing a news site, it is indicated that it's using 5 trackers, or at that point it was using 5 trackers. The same happens in Safari, 5 trackers looking at me. My not that really active browsing activity in Safari resulted almost 150 trackers, where Google was leading really high. Also, most of the sites been tracking me. So it's a pervasive thing. You meet it in most of your online life. How about legal? Legal regulations are subject to recent changes and frequent changes with a huge geographical difference. Let's take the EU and the surrounding, which is a privacy-first world where privacy is a legal issue. You are obliged to opt in for tracking. US is a market-first world. It's all about business. You might opt out, but privacy is a business issue. How much your comfort worth traded off for privacy. And there's a third part of the world, which is China and Russia and states similar to those, which is sort of by default misuse world, where you get no choice. Privacy is a state monopoly. It's just not your property. Privacy should not be necessarily a bad thing. If it is an organic part of the design, it will empower the AI-driven personalization to bring more value in. So how to prevent losing AI-powered personalization's contribution, which is marketing all about? First of all, stay legal. Collect the data that you are allowed to and use it for those purposes you are allowed to. Then stay compliant with the technology changes. Move away from cover tracking and such technologies supporting that. Stay on the top of the business, and that's the tricky part, I think. Offer value with personalization for the visitors. It's one thing that is personalized, but offer loyalty points, offer extra deals, content to opt in for tracking. So that opt-in, this is the consent experience. Design your consent collection experience carefully. Consent on what? Let's take cookies. There are at least 4 types of cookies known. There are strictly necessary cookies that are required to make the website function. If you don't have, the site breaks. You can test it. You don't need consent for that. There are cookies storing preferences, that the language of your choice or the thing that logs you in automatically. Again, you need no consent for that. But for statistical cookies, website usage data analyzed aggregatedly to see how many visitors are in the funnel, that is subject to consent. And marketing cookies that are for tracking online activities to help advertisers is subject to consent because that is identified. That's about you. Just to shed light on the complexity, where to ask for consent. Imagine the not registered user's first visit. You definitely have to ask for consent. A not registered user returns. Again, it's up to you to ask it again, since you are not 100% sure whether you have to store it or not. Or a registered user browsing your site but not logging in, not revealing that he is who's a known guy. Again, it's up to decision whether you force the consent again or not. When a registered user is logged in and known, you don't have to ask for consent every time. And it's important to embed this consent and privacy management step in your registration flow. But there's no best practice currently for that. On the legal and business aspect, the legal responsibility lies with the web shop, with the website owner, not the personalization tool, advertising tool you use. Both the web shop and that service provider are interested in collecting a consent, since the more data in, the more uplift it can deliver. So these service providers are offering and the web shops are using consent management solutions. Collecting consent leads to more data. The more data powers up AI to utilize personalization, which can have a significant uplift on revenue. So it's a joint effort and joint interest of the business side. Consent management is somewhat always annoying, so to be honest. For the visitor, it's annoying because of the several obligatory elements you have to put there. The challenge is to find the least annoying solution to meet those standards. So that's the baseline here. Those standards are, at least in Europe, and we focus on this region when I talk about consent management. It's active opt-in, it's granularity to tell about what happens with the data. It's the ability to withdraw the consent. If I change my mind, I lost my trust, then I don't want to get my data shared with that website. It's transparency, who and for what the data will be used. It should be and must be separated from terms and conditions, those long legal documents. And consent must be beneficial and must tell why it is good for the user. I will show you best practices on 2 examples. One is the UK government's blog with that pretty large sidebar covering most of the page. And even it's huge, it is easy to close with that cross there. And it's pointing to the cookie statement document. However, it is clearly shows the options you have, whether to accept all cookies or reject all cookies. It's up to you. And there's a simple toggle for website traffic measurement, the statistical data collection, to turn it on or off. You can close it easily, but that really little triangle stays there. So it's easy to open it again. Oh, it's there again. Another good example is Austrian Airlines. Their privacy settings is really good in my opinion, granularity to show the purposes, the statistical, the personalization, and the advertising purposes. And these purposes are transparent about what will happen with your data. Like the statistics will be shared with Kayak, which is a flight ticket search engine. And the advertising data will be shared with Google Ads. That's where your data will end up. So these are, I think, good examples, but following those standards pretty well. Let me sum up. AI contributes to revenue through personalization, and that's a statement, and that's been around for years, and companies invested a lot in AI and adopting AI-based technology. Making AI human-centered means respecting privacy, and this changes how you collect and use the data for personalization, changes the input of the whole thing. The good consent management experience. So the good consent management experience will empower e-commerce to leverage the most of the AI-based personalization built on first-party data, on clear data, on legal data that you are allowed to use. Today, I think we are already in the age of data that's subject to consent. You collect data that you're allowed to. It's gone when you were collecting everything and I will figure out what will happen with that. No, you don't have the right, you don't have the technology, and you don't have the purpose there, and actually it's against the good, but against the profit there. So that was me. I'm happy to have your questions and comments now or at the end of the meetup, both.
Okay, so we are waiting for some questions. I have one, but as you mentioned, I have to type it in the chat. Wait, where am I? So, okay, let me ask this not in the way of a chat, because I'm a panelist, so I can ask questions. Good for me.
Go for it.
So, what do we know about people's behavior when interacting with such pop-ups and consent? Like, how many of them are just closing it in 2 seconds and hitting accept all? How many people take it seriously? What do you think? Do you have data on this?
There was a large-scale research in the previous years about cookie banners, which being replaced by these consent panels, and they were low in efficiency. So people basically closed all. I have no data at hand about these consent management panels. So it's a pretty new thing, I think.
Mm-hmm.
The purpose of them is to increase the efficiency.
Okay, thank you. There is another question. How do you balance business requirements with data ethics?
Really good question. I like it. I think you have to sort out the requirements that are not ethical, and how to say. So it's not an ethical question. Maybe that's the toughest point. So it's more legal and legal responsibility and risk question. So data ethics here, it is less dangerous than the legal part, and I think this tracking already moved to the legal level. I'm not sure that I answered the question, but please clarify if it's not.
So Laura says that it did.
Thank you.
So if any other questions regarding the topic comes into your mind, don't hesitate to post. Please tag somehow either Esther or Balázs, and we will get back to that at the end of the meetup. Thank you very much, Balázs.
Thank you.
So applause works here as well. Okay. Monitoring and making sense of data is at least as important as making the data accessible or having the right consent. And when I looked at DNR's homepage about the Romanian COVID data, it simply blew my mind. Like, wow, what's that? Tons of charts, so exotic. I've never seen such charts before. So I'm really curious what's behind those charts, and let's see what the creator says about it. Dinesh, the mic is yours.
Hello, everyone, or good afternoon, I guess. Don't know. I saw in the chat that we do have some participants from North America as well. So yeah, my name is Dinesh Challa, and then I will try to talk a little bit about data visualization, to be honest. And then first of all, thanks a lot for. I would like to thank a lot for the organizers for inviting me, even though I'm not sort of like a strictly UX person. I wish I was, but I'm not as good to be called a UX person. I mean, if you saw probably the code that I have behind some of the web pages of my data visualizations, I would have to run away. But yeah, this is what I do. So when you need a data visualization that is not possible to do in standard Power BI or not possible to do in standard Tableau, that's when you come to me, and then I'll make it happen. So as I'll give you sort of like a 5-minute sort of my 2 cents about where data visualization sits, because even though this is I believe a meetup about sort of like on the sidelines of the World UX Day, it does have kind of like as we saw in the previous presentation, it does have somewhat of an AI connotation or something like that. So in terms of this big sort of like data boom that we have seen, I always so I teach data visualization as well as AI at the Babeș University in Colozsvár, Cluj-Napoca in Romania, as well as in Lancaster University in the UK, where I'm currently located. And sometimes it's not very clear how does this entire sort of like data pipeline gets built. And Tamara McCleary is sort of like a famous data scientist, especially sort of like a science writer type data scientist, puts it much nicer than me. And then she says that we can imagine this as sort of like she calls it the deep learning plateaus, but it's kind of like a pyramid. And then on the bottom of it, we have like the basic fundamentals, maths and stats and so on. After that, it comes data visualization, because you need to understand what does your data mean in order to do any kinds of magic after that. So then after you understand, oftentimes this is also called the data exploration phase, the data visualization. So you need to understand what are the questions in your data that are worth exploring, and then you go explore them. So that would be the machine learning phase. Sometimes, perhaps erroneously, this is called the data sciencing it. So I think it's more accurate to call it the machine learning phase. Jó estét, by the way, for those in Hungarian. So the machine learning would be the gépi tanulás rész. And then only after that, we have sort of like more complicated deep learning and various kinds of neural networks, which we conventionally would call AI-based methods at the tip of the pyramid. So I slot myself on the second stage, the data visualization stage. And then what is data visualization? It's quite tricky, right? So in terms of definition, I think that again, some much smarter people than me put it in a fashion that it's almost like a new language. And it is true in some sense, because the visual communications channel, if you do look up the numbers, it's extremely dense. It's about 100 times denser than the audio channel in terms of our sensory bandwidth. So again, Andy Kirk, this was earlier this year in February, where he was holding a workshop about data visualization. And then he said that it's kind of like you have to develop a literacy. So it's almost like learning a new language. And then he equated it with critical thinking, which I quite liked. So it kind of means that if you can read a chart well, it also means that you can think critically about that data set. So in more conventional sense, data visualization is effectively, we have a message, we want to convey that message to someone. So we use a unified system of signs, that would be the language, to encode that message. And then the receiver uses the same unified system of signs with its unified rules to decode the message. And this unified system of rules, it's perhaps more rich in the visual language than it is in the spoken language. So I think using these as a kind of like an introduction, again, much smarter people than me already in the 60s, Jacques Bertin, who was like very famous researcher who sort of started the study of the field of studying signs and signals in the sense of a symbol. And then he said that, well, the data visualization or any kind of visual language is effectively a system of signs. So when I tried to translate this in terms of steps, okay, so why is data visualization useful? So I often, for example, when I meet a client, sometimes I do data visualization consulting, and sometimes when I meet a client, they ask me, okay, so why is this going to be useful for me? And then I say 3 words. The first is adat in Hungarian, which is data. Then the data has to turn into information, and then this is a tricky part. The data can only turn into information if you identify what is the signal and what is the noise in the data. So you can only use the useful part of a big data C that becomes information. And then the information has to turn into knowledge. So the tudás in Hungarian, it's knowledge. And the knowledge means that this information is correctly used in the context that is meant to be used in. So it's not so useful to give a number unless you contextualize that number, that is this large compared to everything else, or is this small compared to everything else. So if you go through these steps nicely, then I think you have managed to convey this, you managed to follow the rules, the grammatical rules of this visual language, the data visualization. And then, of course, this happens oftentimes that the information to knowledge step, it's quite difficult. So a lot of times we cannot choose the context very well. And this is actually a problem today that I believe that is behind perhaps the great majority of fake information and fake news, or the perceiving of fake information and fake news. Because in a lot of cases, it's not so clear what is the correct context. So when a data is used in a fraudulent context or in a manipulatory context, or its usual regular context. So anyway, this is where I'm coming from. And then I think you might have seen something called the Seikei Data blog. So this is the data visualization blog that I'm trying to. Well, the frequency of it is much lower that I would like it to be. But let me just share my screen quickly. So I have a small data visualization blog where I'm trying to create some kind of a data activism movement, mostly in the Hungarian-speaking region of Romania, which is oftentimes called Transylvania, but also in the general larger Hungarian language populace. And then here we do all kinds of stuff like we predict whether the popular wisdom can predict weather, like Sándor József Benedek. Do they actually bring the warmth in the sack? Or we do other crazy stuff, like, for example, we try to plot all the bears so the region where I'm coming from, they do have quite a lot of bears in the forests, and then sometimes they attack people. So we tried to plot them on a map, and then we tried to incentivize people to use this so that they put these attacks on the map, so that if there's a serious concentration of bears, people can look at it. So I kind of became interested in this entire data visualization field, especially in the Hungarian language speaking area of Romania. Then this March, the dean of the Babes-Bolyai University in Kolozsvár came to me and said, look, now, so just as the COVID situation started to develop, and then we had a short chat. Dr. Levente Szász is his name, and then he's the dean for research. And then we had a short chat of, look, now the country is going to enter into a crisis. I mean, this was March. We didn't really know about the real extent that was about to unfold, but we had a chat, and then we decided that, okay, so what is actually the role of a university in a crisis? And then we boiled it down to be information, and not information in the noun sense of the word, but in the verbal sense, that the role of the university in a crisis is to inform the public accurately. And that's the best it can do, right? So in order to embark on this journey, we've decided that, well, it was also the department of the university where I teach, and where the dean is the economics department. So it's sort of like the business school arm of the university. So we've decided that, okay, now the best thing that the university can spend their resources, their limited resources in a crisis to react, is to create more information. And if you see, there's a famous person, he's running the Information is Beautiful Foundation. His name is David McCandless. And then he says that information is useless unless it's beautiful. So what he means by that is that it's much easier to create this jump from information to knowledge if you have, if your data is beautiful. And then I just realized that I wasn't sharing my screen in the beginning. So this is what I was showing effectively, that we have data, and then it needs to become information, and then it becomes it needs to become knowledge, and then it's not always obvious what is the correct context to be chosen. And this is the pyramid that I was talking about in the beginning. So the fundamentals, data visualization, machine learning, and perhaps any kind of magic of AI after that. So then he came to me, and then we were like, okay, so then we need to create a dashboard, or not necessarily a dashboard, but some kind of a website that has the possibility to inform the public, and it should minimize misinforming the public. And it's quite difficult. It's quite a difficult task, right? Like even national scale resources in a lot of countries weren't able to achieve this correct, accurate information. And then in the early days of the pandemic, especially in March, what you might as well know, what happened is that Johns Hopkins University created their daily data updates, and then they have created a small dashboard, and quickly it blew up, and they started getting 1 billion visitors per day on their dashboard. But then it quickly became obvious that, okay, now we're going to see a big movement in data visualization, and a lot of it is going to be crap. So how can we not be part of that group? So anyways, we set out to create a data visualization dashboard talking about the economic effects of the pandemic. And kind of like our purpose was twofold. So and this is, by the way, where what we ended up with eventually, and I'll talk you a little bit about immediately what do we see here. But the purpose was twofold. So first was to inform policy. Like, we were 100% confident that even the government themselves didn't have any kind of decision-making tool, and the data was just too large. It was not obvious. So that's what we mean by the second layer of the pyramid, that we need effective data visualization in order to know what's going on. So that was the informing policy. That was job one, and the second one was to inform the public as well. So then the very beginning, the biggest problem was that it might sound a little bit silly now, but in the very beginning, the biggest problem was that we have all these time series, right, which were showing at the time the evolution of cases. So active cases, new cases, deaths, and recoveries. And then there was a lot of sort of like governmental decrees, which like restricted the population of the movement, restricted travel, and so on. And we just wanted to see them in one place, and it was an extremely difficult task. Like, we just wanted basically a timeline with some events juxtaposed on the timeline. And apparently it's not so easy to do that. So anyway, we ended up. So I started. By the way, we have a team of 6, and then all my respect and gratitude to the rest of the team. I'm just a visualization guy. I have no idea what the economic predictions. It's like a magic ball to me. What do they say? But I think they're doing a good job. So anyway, I started looking around, and then D3JS, which is a JavaScript-based visualization plugin, had this extension plugin called Cubism. And then this cubism was framed in such a way that we have graphs, and then there's a common timeline that we can share between the graphs. And then we quite like this, to be honest. So this is what we have created. So this is the very first alpha version of our Romanian economic impact monitor. And then those who speak Hungarian can see that we are really in the alpha phase here. We didn't even really have a title. But then we quickly realized that updating a full JavaScript-based website is going to be a pain. And the reason for that is because in the JavaScript website, it's going to be extremely difficult to update the back end, so the data, independently from the front end. And then this is coronavirus data, so we really need to be quick, right? So we really need to kind of like update this on a daily frequency. So that's why I started looking around, and then I found Grafana. So Grafana is a marvelous tool. I appreciate that this might not look like a Grafana, but let me show you. So this is how the stock Grafana looks like. And then the idea is that you still have this nice shared timeline across the graphs, and then you do have a bunch of plugins. And I believe the back, if you're interested in terms of the technology, it's written in React in the background. But what it does is that it decouples. So this is only a visualization framework. So like this, we could decouple the visualization part from the database part. So in parallel with this, we started running our own database. For those who are interested, it's called an InfluxDB, which is a time series database, which was perfectly fitted to our daily updated data. And then like this, in the Grafana, you have some specific data sources, and then each of those data sources can be visualized in a certain panel. So each of these small visualizations, it's a panel inside Grafana. So okay, so we decided that, all right, we're gonna go with Grafana. And then in the beginning, I think we Like we literally only had this page, which just told you, it's kind of like an overview about what's happening in the pandemic. But then with time, we started adding several kinds of sections. So now we have like kind of like a section for the status report, as we call it. So how are the cases evolving? What's the death rate? In terms of what's the mortality rate? What's the positive test ratio? And then the country has some counties. So then later on, I think this was about, you can see that this visualization only starts in May, but actually the government created some policies around September, whether the schools are going to be online or offline, and then they were based on sort of like per capita numbers in each county. So we created a map. Again, this is sort of, you would call this a climate change visualization. So each day it's a heat map, and then each county is shown on this heat map, just to give you like a quick glance of what's going on in the country. And then we started so then we went back to our original purpose. We wanted to have our nice events. So we also showed the global countries, so what's going on in the world. And then we put our vertical lines as we wanted to, so that we can have our nice events. We also showed the events in a table. And then we have a part called governmental measures. So basically how stringent is the government in terms of the lockdown. And then we have like a kind of like a matrix. So here the mobility of the population decreases, and here the governance is more severe. So April and May, people really stayed in their house because the measures were also quite serious. But after that, in the summer months gravitated in not so much decrease in mobility and not so stringent governmental measures. But then you can see that October is already going backwards, and November we are already, or again we are going back to the more stringent phase. And then then we have a few more sort of like economic based indicators. We show the financial markets, so the evolution of stock markets. We show the largest companies in Romania, and then what kind of measures did they take, like which of them sent their employees home, which of them said that we're going to measure temperature every day, and so on. And I think one of the interesting components of the site is that we started showing mobility as well. So we started, let me just refresh this, because I think not all the data was loaded on the refresh. So we started showing mobility. So Google published mobility statistics. So from their perspective, they segmented the activities of the population to 6 categories, which was like leisure, work, and so on. And then they have published mobility statistics relative to before the pandemic. And this was quite useful because we have found that mobility is highly correlated with the economic activity. So anyway, what I just did, I just restarted my site in the background. We always have about 1,000 users, so it's not always, and then we are only using a free AWS server for running this. So it's not the best user experience so far for a user experience conference. But what I wanted to show you is, okay, how is it put together? So we have a T2 micro instance running in AWS. So that's basically the free instance in AWS, and all of our services are containerized. Everything is sort of like Dockerized. And let me just give it a reboot. And in the Docker we use I think, let me just, there's a question mark here, and this will take you to GitHub. And then everything is open source, so we only use open source tools. And then if you go to the services, I think we use Grafana for the front end. We use a Google Sheet because we have the site in 3 languages, so Romanian, Hungarian, and English. So we have like kind of like our own dictionary. We use InfluxDB for storing the data. And what's nice that like this, we decouple the front end from the back end, so we can update the data in InfluxDB. The tool that we use to update the data in InfluxDB is Jupyter. So with Jupyter, which is kind of like a Python front end, we interact with both the Grafana front end if we want to reorganize our panels, and more importantly, if we want to see if how does the site look in mobile phone mode and desktop mode. I'll show you in a minute. And we also interact with InfluxDB. The beauty about this, I will show you in a minute in Docker, is that the Grafana sees the InfluxDB and the Jupyter sees the InfluxDB, but this connection is made in Docker. So effectively users or any attacker cannot actually get access to our data. They don't even know this is hosted on a completely different IP address, and this IP address is obscured, so you can't really access our data. I mean, it's not like we're hosting the nuclear launch codes in this case, but I think it's kind of like a nice realization. Now, very quickly, we realized that the Grafana plugins are relatively limited. So we can show timelines very nicely in Grafana. So these are the default Grafana plugins. You can show bar charts and timelines. But for example, if you wanted to show a map, that's quite difficult. So we had to actually create our own. We had to create our own visualizations for some of the panels. For this, we just use a simple Ajax embed, which kind of like similar to an iframe. So we've just code up our own small, tiny website, and then we embed this in the page. So for example, the map that you have seen, this is how it looks like in a page of its own. And then here we just have the map, and then we have our timeline, and then we just render this entire HTML page in that particular. It's kind of like an iframe. It gives a JSON response, but it's kind of like an iframe within that panel. This is, for example, the quadrant visualization. So everything that it cannot be done in stock Grafana, we use iframes. These visualizations are created in D3+, which is an extension of D3.js, which is kind of like the most prominent custom data visualization library. Now, of course, we need to host these visualizations. You can see that I have an HTML, I have a custom address for these. So we run an Apache server as well, which is just a simple HTTP server to host our custom visualizations. And then again, we embed them in the back end. So you cannot really change their source or attack them. And then we are trying to serve everything from HTTPS. So we use also a container called Traffic, which makes sure that all the site's components are served over HTTPS. So all of these, if you go through the setup, I think it's about a 5-minute job. I mean, I could do a live coding session, but really, if you just follow the steps, it's everything is packaged in a Docker Compose file. So each of these services run in their own containers. They don't affect with each other, but they communicate with each other. And then I'll show you the Docker Compose file now. So, for example, first we start the traffic service, which just makes sure that we run everything over HTTPS. Then we have a nice Grafana service, which is also a stock Grafana. We just pull the stock Grafana. We don't do any kind of customization to it. We do it later, but I'll show you what happens. Then Grafana actually comes in 2 containers. It has its own image renderer. So if you want to run the page in a static mode, it also supports that. Then we run the InfluxDB as a separate container. We only connect it to the internal network. So you cannot access the InfluxDB only through Jupyter or Grafana. But Grafana actually only has a read permission. Only Jupyter has a write permission to the database. So Jupyter is our main interface, our management interface for the visualization. And then I think I have it open here. Let's see. Yeah, it looks like this. So it's a typical, it's a standard Jupyter lab, and we just use an authentication in the background to access both Grafana and InfluxDB. So this is actually available to the internet. It's protected with a SHA-256 key. And then on top of that, we have the HTTP, so the static HTML host, and that's about it. And then you can just Docker Compose up everything, and then Bob's your uncle, as you would say. Once the Grafana starts up, of course, it looks like. Let me just refresh this quickly. once the Grafana looks starts up, it looks like this. So it doesn't have all the nice colors that in terms of theme, right? It doesn't have all the nice colors that I showed you here on our custom visualization. Let me just give it for some reason this doesn't want to get a refresh. Actually, I'll transition over to our backup server so that I can show you guys, but this will just not have the latest data. That's the only difference. So, okay, and then I switch it to English. So this uses a custom style, the Grafana, and then after I've started up my visualization, I have a custom, I think here, there's a shell script somewhere, if I find it, just a second. Style, Grafana, yeah, that's about it. So effectively, what we do on top of after starting up the Docker file, we inject some custom CSS into the Grafana rendering. We don't rebuild the Grafana; that's too complicated. We just sort of like replace everything with our own style, and then we have our nice website style the way we wanted it to be. So I know that I talked about a lot of things. The reason behind Grafana was this twofold, so that for each of the visualizations, we can decouple the data update from the front end. That was one. And the second one was that because this is written in a React framework, we don't need to specifically support mobile layout. So if I switch this to a mobile layout, React in the background will handle everything, and then all our nice panels will be resized, and then our menu is going to be resized, and everything just looks kind of neat on the mobile phone. And all of this is just handled by Grafana, because I was really not in the mood to write. Most of the time, if you are in the business of data visualization, you will have to write a custom user interface for mobile. So we really like this. We really like this. This was the reason that we have chosen Grafana. So let me see if my mobility. Yeah. So my mobility, the one that I was trying to show you, has reloaded now, but in the backup server, as I said, we don't have the latest data. The other one should start soon. And then on top of that, we show you also the real estate market. Maybe it was affected by the pandemic. Apparently not. So we have seen that in the largest cities, the real estate prices didn't really change. In fact, they have grown in some of the towns. And yeah, we are kind of like, we have a Facebook page, COVID-19 Romanian Economic Impact Monitor. So you're welcome to like that. And they're kind of expanding the site, where we're adding new sections every week or so. And so far the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. So yeah, we're quite happy about that. And then initially unfortunately we thought that we will just be running this project for about 3-4 months in March, but then we're still in it. And then, well, there's no sign that we're going to finish anytime soon. So that's how the Romanian Economic Impact Monitor site is put together. That's how the mechanics of it work in the background. I do know that this talk was perhaps more technical, but I think on a meetup this should fly well enough. If you do have any kind of questions, I'm more than happy to answer them, both technical as well as sort of like more data visualization philosophy or something like that. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dinesh. It was a very insightful talk. So yeah, this huge amount of data is really very interesting, and how you are making sense of data, that's also very helpful. I think that the human touch in this is really about having like a large table to try to comprehend for people, or having like a short summary that the situation is bad. It's far not enough. And what I saw is that these charts are really understandable, so, and also very helpful. And yeah, on the other hand, it's also exciting, you know, not in the best way, but it's exciting. So I will start with questions again because I can. Sure. Do you have any information about like if the government is using it or who is using your application?
So we had several appearances on the sort of like, there's no national TV. There's kind of like a national TV, but it's not very well followed. But sort of like on the largest on the TV channel with the largest following, they have a show which is specific, like economic show, and I think we have had like three appearances there so far, and then based on that, like several, like I think one of the secretaries in the government, which is kind of like the minister level in Romania, has reviewed it on his Facebook page. We got kind of like a boost then. So I think several, the finance minister in one of these panel discussions on the TV, the finance minister was one of the attendees, and then he kind of also hinted that they're kind of using it. It's a bit of an odd question because it's prepared by a university, and it's not kind of like curated or mandated by the government. So in Romania, the politicians kind of like have a mindset that even if they use it, they wouldn't recognize it. But we do see the follower numbers. So I think on a good day we have about 100,000 downloads, which is beyond everything that we would have imagined. And then that's why it's in the beginning, basically managing the page was just a 24/7 job because it just couldn't cope with the number of visitors. So yeah, I think it kind of managed to achieve the goal that we have set out in the beginning to do.
Wonderful. That's really cool. So Aniko has a question in the chat as well. So the question sounds like this: how did you choose what kind of topic you want to visualize?
Did will anybody make changes based on your data? Yeah, so that's quite interesting. so yeah, that's quite interesting. It's a twofold answer to the first one. What we choose to visualize is, so we have a small research group. We have as I said, if you go to our team, we have these 6 wonderful people in the team, and then I'm not an economist, but the rest of them are. And then one of the chaps is like part of the, I think, board of directors of the National Bank. So he really has like an overview of the national fiscal policy. And then others are like professors of finance and economics. So really they suggest in terms of, okay, for the economy, these are the indicators that would be interesting to visualize. So we have a table here, I think in the section called macroeconomic indicators, we have a table. And then our specialists say that these are the important indicators that you need to track in order to tell whether the economy is going bust or boom. So we try to incorporate this in the. Of course, it's not very interesting to just visualize the number of employees, even though we do that at the top. So we kind of like aggregate these into indicators, like this indicator. So a portion of that question is data sets that would be judged interesting by a panel of experts. But the second one is whatever is available. So for example, because I'm not so sure that we are doing much better in Hungary, but in Romania, the government is really having this mindset that they're trying to be extremely protective of their data. They're kind of like a little bit afraid of if data comes to surface, so they're not very good at sharing data, and like we have these kind of jumps in case numbers, which is completely unacceptable. It just means that until now they were recording something and then they realized, oh, you know what, we were recording it the wrong way. So then they just made a big correction, and suddenly I think 17,000 people healed from one day to another. So it's really not the best situation that we could be in. So they're kind of protective of their data. So we are trying to use only official sources that are mandated by the government. And for example, that's why the county level cases were not published until 2 months after the beginning of the pandemic. We have made the request publicly on our Facebook page as well, and others have made the request as well. So maybe that contributed, but after a while they started publishing county level cases as well. So it's this too. So what kind of data is actually available, and from that, what is useful decided by a panel of experts. That's the answer to the first part of the question. And will or anybody make changes based on data? Well, we hope so. So for example, we show the real estate market on the bottom of it, and then I know that sometimes real estate professionals came to us and asked, okay, so what does this mean? Can you have any projections on it? And also the fact that in one of the largest sort of economic talk shows in the country, we have been invited, and then our opinion has been asked. I think kind of shows that at least some people are paying attention to it. It's obviously very difficult to measure whether they will make actual changes based on that.
Great. That's good to hear that you really have an impact with such a tool, and I really will dive deeper into the data as well, both from like craft perspective, because I'm really interested in data visualization, and also from interest perspective.
Cool. Just click on the question mark on the top right corner, takes you to the GitHub page. You should be good to go.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dénes. And now we came to the last but not least talk of our tonight. So Zoli will speak about more human-faced AI. What I really like about Zoli's talk is that and also the applications he's involved in, is that he's really into like watching everything through the user's eye. And it is true for his presentations as well. And I think that the products they are developing at IBM Budapest Lab, where Zoli is the principal UXer, those are also great, valuable, and useful. So the 3 pillars apply. Let's see, Zoli, the mic is yours.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm sharing my screen. If everything goes well, then you can both hear me and see my slides. So I'm going to share some of my personal takeaways about AI, both from a user perspective and both from a designer perspective. And basically my journey with AI started in late 2016 when I purchased this Amazon Echo device for home, just to experiment with voice assistant and this whole voice UX technology. I really loved it. And just after I purchased it, we had some guests coming over, including kids, and the kids were learning English in school, and they explored this device. They were having quote unquote conversations with Alexa, asking questions like, hey, Alexa, how are you doing? How old are you? Do you have friends? Do you have siblings? And all sorts of, you can imagine those conversations. But they enjoyed it. And I was all of a sudden the cool uncle with the cool gadget that kids found, funny. So that was cool. Now, the next thing I know is that I think like a day after this party or time we had together with the kids, I just got an email from Amazon thanking me my recent purchase. It was basically a back supporter that you can have in your car. Now, the thing was that I didn't order this. So first I was a bit worried that maybe my account had been hacked or something. And I started to investigate through the Amazon support team. And it turned out that I ordered this through my Alexa device, through the Echo, which was funny. I didn't know that there's a thing that you can actually order stuff through Alexa. That's one. And the other is that I obviously didn't do it. So I had to do some investigation. And it turned out that obviously the kids did it. Like the kids actually ordered something through this device. And I was fascinated, like, how did that happen? And then I could actually listen to what had been said or told to Alexa. And it turned out that when the kids were asking something like, are there any friends with you or something like that, like what the device actually listened to or interpreted this was order a new something. And then what the kids said Alexa for some reason translated into a back supporter to the car. But I was still fascinated, like, okay, maybe, you know, Alexa misunderstood the kids, but how did the kids manage to actually place an order? It's like a million questions, like, you know, what specific, you know, type do you want? Where do we ship it? How do you pay? And so on. And so how did they confirm it? And then I went into the settings, and it turned out that there's a feature for the Echo device. It's called voice purchasing, and it was enabled by default. And there was an option to you know, have a confirmation code, but it was disabled by default. So basically, the default setting for this Echo device was that if you order something, it will be just delivered. But I still don't get, like, okay, but how did the kids go through the whole, you know, ordering or checkout process? And it turned out that this was, you know, in such a beta shape that the conversation was something like this. So you could say, hey, Alexa, order me, or order a shoe for me. And the conversation was like this: order a shoe for me. And then Alexa would say, done. And what the Amazon, you know, system would do in the background was basically search for the keyword that you said. So in this case, it would have it would run a search for shoe, and whatever was the first item for that keyword, it would just deliver that one to you. They didn't ask what type of shoe you want, didn't ask what, you know, color do you want, didn't ask what's your foot size is, basically. Just get the first item shipped. And at this point, I was impressed. Like, it was either like a super dark pattern from Amazon, or it was just a really bad design. And I Googled, because I couldn't believe that this is actually a product experience. Like, you can accidentally order stuff. And I Googled if other people had the same problem, and apparently nobody complained about this. And only after a few weeks later, after this incident happened, I bumped into a story which was kind of similar to mine. It was actually an American family living in Texas, where their 6-year-old kid was alone in the living room with Alexa, and she asked their Alexa to order a dollhouse and some Danish cookies for her. And obviously, voice purchase was on. There was no confirmation. So the next day, you know, DHL just arrived to the house, and the dollhouse was delivered. And the parents were actually proud of this, because they actually alerted some news people that this is such a cute story, it should be in the news. And it was actually in the news. So, like, news people came to this house and they interviewed the little kid. It was a super cute story. And this is a nice story, and I love that this story is just getting better from here, because what happened next is like, it had quite a good coverage in national TV, this story, because, you know, it's so fun, you know, little kid talking to Alexa, you know, it's like some Christmas magic. And actually, there was a news reporter and anchorman in the San Diego local television covering this story. And then the guy said on TV that, you know, he loved the little girl saying, Alexa, order me a dollhouse. And as soon as the guy, you know, said this sentence out loud, well, it turned out that many families have their Alexa devices in the living room right next to the TV. And what you need to know is that such voice assistant devices can't really distinguish between human voice and TV voice. So as soon as the guy on TV said the wake word, which is Alexa, all these devices were triggered. And since, you know, back then voice purchase was on by default and there was no confirmation required, as soon as the guy said, Alexa, order me a dollhouse, somehow these Alexa devices, the Echo devices, thought that, you know, their owner wants them to order a dollhouse. So, you know, all the Echo devices within the San Diego area were triggered, and like a lot of families in San Diego just got their dollhouses delivered in 2 days. So basically, this story, this second one, when, you know, the TV actually triggered the Echo devices, it went viral as well, and it had like a lot of coverage. And then later on, of course, South Park pulled a prank on this as well. There was a specific episode a couple of months later when in South Park, I think Cartman gets like an Echo and a Google Home maybe, and then basically they keep talking to these devices through the whole episode. And since people were watching this on TV, all these, hey Google and Alexa, do this and that, triggered, you know, like a set of smart devices for viewers. And it was South Park, so obviously people were not super frustrated, but some of the devices were actually like frozen because they got so many comments from this episode of South Park. So at this point, my first takeaway, my first impression was that, okay, so AI is not that smart. I think we shouldn't worry. I think it won't destroy humanity and it won't take over the world. Skynet is just not happening yet. It's just a toddler. I think we shouldn't worry at this point. And then a couple of months later, flash forward a bit, we were at work. As Csongor mentioned, I'm working for IBM, and our business unit just founded a new mission. We founded IBM Watson Media, and back then we were working on a video streaming platform. And the reason behind founding IBM Watson Media is to see how we can combine our video streaming and video communication expertise with some cognitive and AI capabilities to see what happens if you combine video and AI. There are like tons of exciting stuff there. Obviously, we were super excited. We all heard about Watson. We were impressed by what we saw on the news, like when Watson won the Jeopardy. It seemed like a super smart computer. So with the help of Watson, we can achieve anything basically. So we started to put together an MVP or a proof of concept, if you like. And basically our vision was to put together a system where, media companies and video archive owners can upload, tons of videos. And with the help of AI, we kind of process and analyze all those videos. So, if you upload a video, we're going to use speech to text to understand what's being said in the video. We would use natural language understanding to find the meaning of the audio. Like, so what is the video about? What are the keywords? What are the sentiments? We would use facial recognition to identify who's speaking on those videos. Who are the main actors who show up? We would use object recognition to understand what's there in the video visually. So in other words, we would just process those videos and add a lot of metadata to the videos automatically. So if you have like a large video archive, you would be able to search for specific videos. So if you are BBC, let's say, and you have like 50 years of news broadcasts, you could easily just type into a search field, I want to see videos where Queen Elizabeth is talking about Donald Trump before he was elected in 2016. And then, you would just have the result. Now, when we started to design this product, our impression was it's really easy to come up with feature ideas. It's really easy to just sketch up the screens and dream big. And then around this time, Silicon Valley, the series was still on HBO. And I'm including a video here because I think this was super relevant for us. So I'm just going to play first and reflect on that.
It's ready.
Please, God.
What will you say if I told you there is an app on the market?
We're past that part. Just demo it.
Okay. Let's start with a hot dog.
Holy shit!
Yes!
It works!
Oh, motherfuck!
Huzzah!
Jin Yang, my beautiful little Asiatic friend, I'm going to buy you the palapa of your life. We will have 12 posts, braided palm leaves. You'll never feel exposed again.
I'm gonna be rich. Fuck you, Guilfoyle. Do pizza.
Let's do pizza.
Yeah.
Okay. Pizza.
Not hot dog?
Wait, what the fuck?
Huh?
That's it? It only does hot dogs?
No, and a not hot dog.
So this is basically so painfully accurate. Then here's the startup team, the stakeholders and the developer is super proud that he made an algorithm that identifies hot dog. And yet the stakeholders expect that it's going to identify all sorts of food. But AI doesn't work like this. You can't have all the information automatically. You need to train it, basically. So the first step is you train it to identify hot dog. But basically, if you want it to recognize all sorts of food, then you need to do this training exercise, like 1,000,000 times so that it would identify all food for you. This is exactly what we experienced. So anyway, we kept working on AI solutions, and the next opportunity that we found was captions, which is a really interesting topic. So because of accessibility reasons, many countries require that TV companies should have live captions for each of the content that they broadcast. So if there's a news broadcast, a weather forecast, a sports event, whatever is being said on the TV has to be there as captions. And how they do it currently is there's a profession called stenographer or stenographers. These are like professional captioners who have these large headphones listening to what's being said on TV, and they have this special keyboard to type those captions in real time. So this is basically done manually. And since it's done manually with human resources, it's obviously expensive because you have to pay people to do it. And this is a really exhausting job to do. So you have to you have to have like backup people being ready to jump in and continue if the first captioner is tired. Sometimes the quality is uneven because people just get, you know, exhausted doing this. So this was a good opportunity for us to focus on and just basically use Watson and use speech to text to replace those people to see if we can have proper quality live captions. So we started to work on Watson captioning. And our first idea was that since we have speech to text, so whatever is being said in English, we can just have a transcript for that text immediately because, you know, this is how speech to text works. But what you need to know is that speech to text has like this core dictionary of English phrases. So if it's in English, it's probably going to identify all the words. But if a word is not in the dictionary, like let's say Budapest is a property name, it's a name of a city, obviously. If you say Budapest in a video and this term is not in the dictionary of the speech to text, it's just going to find the closest word in English that sounds like this one. So in this case, if you say Budapest, it's going to say something like be depressed. This is a true story actually. So when in one of our videos we were talking about the Budapest lab, the speech to text identified as to be depressed lamp, which was, you know, kind of funny, but said at the same time. And since our main use case here was unscripted programs, like when people have weather forecasts or people share the news, those type of content is typically full with or full of property names. So if you listen to the San Diego news on TV, some local places will be mentioned, like Del Mar, Miramesa, and Encinitas. And these words will obviously not be in the core corpus or the core dictionary of the speech to text. So you need to train it somehow. You need to teach your AI, just like the hot dog guy did, to identify if these words are mentioned. And now for us designers, the original prompt that we have was something like, how do we provide the best-in-class captions? But at this point, we just realized this is not what we should focus on. We should focus on allowing or enabling our users to train their AI model, to train their speech-to-text model to identify the terms that they use, like local politicians' name, local names of local places, and things like that. So this was basically my first real professional takeaway about AI. So if you design something for AI, the first thing that you need to focus on is not screens, it's basically data, like what data will be there to back up your solution. And then if you think about like common AI failures, just a couple actual examples to see when, you know, there's a self-driving bus introduced in a city and it's, you know, it crashes in the first hour of service because it hadn't been trained to sort of be defensive when a truck is coming towards that. Or when Microsoft had this experiment, they launched a chatbot and they thought that they wouldn't train the chatbot on Twitter, but when people will reply to that chatbot, that's going to be the training material. Now, people obviously were trolling and they, you know, had used nasty language, you know, sexism, racism, and stuff like that. And this is exactly how this chatbot started to behave, because the training material was kind of like low quality. Facebook at one time started to let two AI chatbots talk to each other and just to see what happens. And what happened was they developed their own language, and the scientists were afraid and scared to death. So they, shut them down completely because they started to behave like a black box. And this is exactly how Skynet would arise, I guess. And then there were quite a few really failed stories about face recognition. One was that Amazon tried to test their face recognition software by trying to identify wanted criminals in public photos, and then they ended up falsely identifying a lot of congressmen as criminals. It was obviously not true, so they shut this program down as well. And then, sometimes we just expect a lot of things from AI. None of the AIs at that time were able to predict what's going to be the outcome for the FIFA World Cup in 2018 because AI is just not, a good fit for that. So basically, there are two patterns that I see here. One is that an AI will fail if you don't have proper training and data to use. And the other is if the expectations are too high. So sometimes we expect that AI will just, turn the world upside down. It's going to solve problems that humanity is not able to solve yet. And I think we're just not there yet. So when we're working for AI, I think expectation management is super important. And as designers, as product people, we need to focus on, some sort of an MVP, like what would be a minimal viable product, a minimal viable AI solution that we can put into market, and where we can actually meet the expectations. And we have a lot of AI actually around us that sometimes we don't really recognize as AI. So next time, if you go to a parking garage and when you have paid already, the barrier might just lift up for you and you can just leave because there's a camera right next to the barrier which scans your license plate, identifies your car, and then recognizes that you have paid already, so you're okay to go. It's just a basic OCR, just a character recognition system, but it's basically an AI service. Somebody trained that service so that it can identify different sort of license plates. Or your spam filter in Gmail or any other email service is basically an AI. As you mark emails as spam or unmarked spam emails, this is how you train it. This is an AI service. It's trying to find patterns that are characteristic to spams. That's how they identify what's spam or what's not. And all sorts of recommendation systems in e-commerce websites or on Spotify in your Discover Weekly. This is basically AI trying to find the best matches for your tastes. And I think we all know that when we fly with commercial airlines, that pilots are not basically driving the plane for the whole flight. It's usually just a couple of minutes when they are actually driving it, and for the rest of the time, it's just basically the autopilot. Now, the autopilot is basically driven by AI as well. I mean, we never say that your plane is driven by AI because it would be super scary for people, but actually there are some AI services in the back end doing some like real automatic and recurring steps on behalf of the pilot. So going back to our domain, which is videos, basically, we went back to continue the research, and we started to identify some of these low-hanging fruits where there are some super specific pain points or problems that we might be able to solve with the help of AI. So let's say if you're, again, like a broadcasting company or production company, you need to be able to say if there is like gun, nudity, violence in your movies, because that's, that defines who should watch this. So currently what's happening is that production companies seek the whole movie frame by frame to see if there's any gun visible in the movie. If there's a gun, then it's not appropriate for children. But we can use AI to do it because it's just visual recognition. This shouldn't be a difficult problem to solve. Or if you need to know if in your movies there are any product placement, or you need to know for how long like a specific logo is visible in a specific movie, we don't have to have people to do it. This is something that AI is really good in, visual recognition. So that was our next takeaway. Like, we need to find the low-hanging fruits first before, building a starship powered by AI. We just need to find some really specific pain points that we can solve with AI. How do we do it? Now, in this sense, I think AI is not really different from, or AI products are not really different from any other product that you might be working on. What you do basically is you do the research, you leverage design thinking. So if you are used to doing, let's say, journey mapping for your customers, it's super simple. You just obviously try to understand what's the current journey of your users, what are the pain points, how might we, solve those pain points. And as soon as we're talking about opportunities, we can dig deeper a bit, like, okay, so in this opportunity, for these specific pain points, what AI services might we use? Maybe visual recognition could help here, or maybe this would be a speech-to-text service that we could help here. And at the same time, obviously, we need to think about the data, because as I said, data is basically the fuel to any AI experience. So let's talk about data right at this point, and let's dig deeper into it. So let's talk about data. Let's have a specific exercise just about data. What are the data that we have currently? What are some data that we need for this service? And what are some data that is nice to have? And then we can also sort out what sort of data do we have? Like, is that a public data, like a weather report? Is it a private one that we have on our servers? Or is it something generated or owned by the user? And then, it's a simple exercise that we start to do the post is just as any other, design thinking exercise would require us. And add this perspective to the equation. Now, if you followed IBM, I think you know that IBM has their own design thinking framework. It's called Enterprise Design Thinking. And obviously, a lot of designers within IBM are working on AI solutions. So they actually created this specific framework, design thinking framework, designed for AI. It's called Team Essentials for AI. And it's basically like 6 super specific design thinking exercises that you can use on top of your design thinking framework. And it's basically a step-by-step guide for cross-functional teams to use some design thinking exercises specifically when you're designing to AI. And this way you can kind of find a balance between AI, data, user needs, technology, and business, and so on. And from this perspective, from design thinking perspective, I think it's crucial that you understand and accept that AI, just as any other technology, it's a tool. It's not the goal. So you shouldn't build an AI solution just to build with AI. So you need to still keep your eyes on the ball, which is like keep your eyes on the pain points that your users have, and then see if AI is a way to solve those problems or not. And then just to wrap it up, I just want to reflect back to my original story with the Echo device. I think our relationship is now much better. I had this original disappointment with this fake order, but I think now we get along well. And ironically, just when I was preparing for this talk, I was making tea, and I like to use Alexa for reminders. So I was making tea. I had to wait for 8 minutes to remove the tea from the pot. And so I asked Alexa, please remind me in 8 minutes. And she said, yeah, cool. I'm going to remind you in 8 minutes. What's the reminder for? And I said, it's the tea. And she probably somehow misunderstood me. But anyway, 8 minutes later, I had a notification on my phone, and also I had a beeping noise that it said, here's a reminder for you to die. And at this point, I wasn't really sure how T was misunderstood into die, or is it some sort of like a secret message to me? But anyway, I think it's a good symbol for probably a 5th and last takeaway, which is, I think, we as designers, and the data people and data science, we need to learn to speak each other's languages, because AI products and AI experiences, I think, are not designed in Figma and Sketch and InVision. These products are usually designed at whiteboards by a cross-functional team. And I think that it's really important that designers should be part of that cross-functional team to make sure that what we end up with as AI experiences will be human-centered. So we need that seat at the table, but to have the seat at the table, we need to make sure that we speak the same languages as other stakeholders. So that concludes my talks. Thank you very much for listening, and thanks for having me here.
I know it's annoying, but still everyone got the applause sound.
Actually,
Okay, thank you, Zoli. Now that was the thing I was talking about in the beginning of our talk. So that's really AI applied, AI chosen wisely for different products. And I don't know if anyone has a question, but obviously, who should have one? The speaker. But now let's start with Laura's question. Do you see the questions, or should I read it?
Yeah, how
now?
can you teach design to talk data, and how do you prototype for AI? Yeah, that's a good question. So my experience is that, like in Agile, we say that we need cross-functional teams, and in like regular Agile, we say that, you know, we need to work in cross-functional teams, and that is, like, I think, super important for AI. So in our projects, before we started to do anything, even research, we just had to gather together with the developers and just to have a general understanding of what we are talking about, especially for captions. Like, you know, our prompt wasn't to just, okay, so how do you design a caption to the screen? You know, we had to step back like a lot just to understand, okay, so obviously we did the user research, so we had an understanding of what the user need is. And then it was like a lot of people living basically, or sitting in the same meeting room, using a large whiteboard, and there were data scientists, data engineers, regular engineers, AI specialists, UX designers, sort of like, and it was like really a cross-functional effort there. And we had to make sure that we understand it. And in many cases, I think when a designer was assigned to a project like this, I think 90% of the time we were working in either spreadsheets or Word documents to sort of design the experience, and only like a really little time was spent actually designing screens. So I think the focus is really different from a regular project, and this is basically how we, you know, learn as designers to talk data. We need to spend so much time together to have like a basic understanding. We don't have to know exactly how like machine learning and deep learning works behind the scenes, because I think it's, even for probably data scientists, is super complicated. But we need to have an understanding of, you know, how will we feed that AI product with data? How do we get the data? What sort of data do we need? And so on. And how do we prototype for AI? Well, it's twofold, I think. So we had classic or traditional prototypes like UI prototypes. So just to have a vision, okay, so if we implement everything, this is how video enrichment would work. This is how we would display data next to a video. This is how we would create a search. But at the same time, there were a lot of like development prototyping, which were sometimes done in like command line interfaces. That was a strange experience for designers, but we actually had to use those. Like when we had that challenge, how do we enable our users to train domain terms easily? Then we had quite a few brainstorming sessions and with developers, and we had no idea if those ideas would work or not. So we had to prototype it, but we had to prototype it functionally. So somebody from the development team would put together a script in Python, let's say, and they would share that script with everybody in the team. And then we would sort of like do it as if we were the customer. So I had like a Python script, and I had to create CSVs with domain terms and words and pronunciation and feed it and see if that works or not. So it's kind of really twofold. We really had to prototype the backend as well, and the data part, not just the UI.
Thank you. Now my question.
Okay.
So how many of those light purple opportunities Post-its do you have in your cupboard?
Right now, I think we always, you know, clean them. But but in these projects, I mean, if you that's what you mean. Basically, the whiteboard was the primary tool for the whole team, basically. So while we had, you know, like a year ago, seemed like it was ages ago, we still had the office. We had like war rooms for this, where, you know, we would ideate on, and then we would just log the meeting room because we had to keep those walls, and then, you know, went back to the next day to continue.
But do you have like a backlog of opportunities for developing features, or how do you?
On the backlog, yeah. So we are, you know, working in an enterprise environment where we need to like really be cautious where we put our bets. So we need to build things that, you know, customers will pay for, obviously. So we need to focus on like, okay, so like our target customers, what are the biggest pain points? And then as we had in the Explore Fit Discover research, we identified a lot of these opportunities. But as I said, it's really, it's way harder creating an MVP, an MVP product with an AI. So it's not like just you put something together in 2 days and then let's validate it, because it's more like you spend 2 weeks understanding the different data sources and then 2 days designing some algorithm to try if it may work. And then you need to create some sort of a UI so that you can present it to a potential customer to see it. So I think we don't have like, we identified a few really specific use cases and pain points. And then it was kind of, you know, depending on like, you know, which customers we were talking to, sort of like, that was, so depending on who we talked to and where we see, or where we saw the potential, you know, business or deal, obviously that's how we kind of decided what to build first and how to prioritize. But that was really an iterative way. So it happened not once that we started to build something and we were super committed that this is what we need to, you know, end up with, this is what we need to build. And then in the middle of the project, we just, you know, iterated, because as we were speaking to the customers, we had this aha moment that, oh, maybe this is the wrong way. I mean, this is a good foundation, but maybe we need to focus on that part.
Clear. Okay. If there are no other questions, you can still ask questions to other panelists as well, if you wish. But if there are no more questions, I will say the final words. And you know, I really like being on meetups or seeing like different conversations and presentations, which are teaching me like in a very entertaining way. And this is exactly what I feel now. So obviously privacy, as we are working together with Balázs and Esther, was not totally new for me, but I have never saw the research result of that project just yet. So that was very insightful. Dénes, your charts and how you approach data visualization is super cool, and also the value is like very clear, especially in this situation. And of course, Zoli, thanks for showing us how the design thinking can be applied, how you can really make AI like something that carries value. And I think that you also said one of the most important sentence in the world of AI, that we are not doing AI just for the sake of AI. That's, I think, something that would really bring back our humans topic, and something that would really help us designers and researchers and product managers and data scientists to decide what to do and how to do it with this superb technology. So thanks for everyone, including the meetupper, the attendees, the panelists, and also, of course, thank you very much for the organizers, Aniko and Shara, who made this event happen. And so thanks, and hope to see you soon, sometimes on another UX Budapest meetup, or just join to our Facebook channels, or just find the panelists somewhere on the internet because they are there. And yes, hope to see you soon again. Adios.
Thank you. It was fun. Bye.
Thank
Thank you.
you. See you soon.